Everyone, I am so excited to get Andrea Ellen Reed as our guest artist today. Boy, I believe it was 2007 that I first became aware of Andrea's work. And I was a commercial photographer, as I still am, in San Francisco, and I'm still here, but I wasn't affiliated with this school. And a friend of mine worked in the equipment room. And she was a great artist and still is a great artist. And I remember her telling me, you gotta see this woman's work. It deals with race, and it's beautiful, and it's confrontational, and it's strong. You really gotta see her work. And somehow I saw it. I don't know if it was on the website or what it was, but it was, oh, it was utterly original and just seemed to be walking to the beat of its own drummer. And it didn't really seem to even reflect the times at all. It just seemed to be its own thing, to me at least. And so her work was always on my radar. And then Andrea and I had the good fortune to cross paths a number of times over a couple years. And, you know, it was fascinating to catch up with her now and really see the power of her portraits. And so I'm leafing through some of her work just from her website here to kind of introduce you all to, you know, how she approaches her subjects, what her engagement is with her subjects. This portrait I love. I didn't know if they were sisters or if they were friends or if they were cousins or what they were, but I love the ambiguity and the fascination and just how thoroughly engaged she is with her subjects. And, you know, the thing that always caught me about her work in the early days when it was more conceptual, and then here where it seems to have more of a foot in documentary, is she is fully engaged with the subject matter. You know, these people are engaged with her, and you know, she's giving them her undivided attention and they are giving it back to her, or that's the way it seems to me. And so I won't do all the talking here. I just wanted to leaf through some images, and I'll turn this over to Andrea, and we'll just say hello for a little bit. Andrea, thank you so much for being a part of this class today. Great to see you.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's good to see you again too, Tim. And I just have to say, it is pronounced Andrea. I know it's spelled like Andrea, but yes, it's good to see you again, Tim, and have this conversation with you and the students. Because as you know, I went here a little while ago, so I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we are happy to have you. Whenever we have a guest artist, it's always interesting to me, like usually guest artists like to share what they're doing now, and that's what they're most fascinated with.
Sure.
But I'm always interested, how did you originally get into photography?
Well, I think that's interesting. I was studying psychology at Howard University in Washington, D.C. That's where I got my undergrad degree from. And I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do with my life or career. I think I just chose psychology because I wanted to know why people did the things that they did, not necessarily because I was interested in it as a career.
Yeah.
And my brother, who is, 2 years older than me, my brother Ryan is a sculptor and a painter and was studying at Hampton University. But he had been doing that for years in high school and into undergrad. And funny thing, I mean, he gave me a Christmas gift, and he usually gives me terrible Christmas gifts. So this year he actually gave me a book of National Geographic photographers from all over the world. And I looked at that, and there were, tons of different people in that book. And I looked at that and I said, I can do that. And so after I saw that, I picked up my camera and I initially started doing still lifes, which was boring. And I quickly put that down. And then I realized, no, I really do want to photograph people. I think I had a little bit of trepidation about, just approaching people that I didn't know. But I started doing it on the streets of DC, right outside of Howard University. And to my surprise, there were a lot of people who were willing to talk to me and willing to share their stories with me. And of course, what I gravitated towards was African-American culture, because I am African-American and I'm very proud of my culture. And so that's who I wanted to photograph, is everyday African-Americans. No matter what they were doing, I was interested in the story. And so I approached people who I had never met before. And I asked them about themselves first. I asked who they were and just had a conversation with them. And then I then would ask them, could I photograph them? And they graciously said yes. And so, some of the things that you had alluded to, people being engaged with me and things like that. It's because I'm trying to learn about their story, however brief that encounter may be, or however long that encounter might be. We're having a conversation before any type of photo is taking place in most cases.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, it's interesting. My awareness of your work back in 2007 was almost more conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't as strongly documentary as what it
No.
seems like you've evolved into. Do you want to reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I was so I got my MFA at the Academy of Art in 2007, and the work that I was doing actually dealt with the historical significance of blackface and the contemporary ramifications of things like that, detrimental symbols that we see in the African American community or in the media. And so, yeah, I really actually went to the Academy of Art to do that project. I knew I wanted to do that project, but I had come from more of a documentary place. And that was interesting because when I reflected on that project, it was a tough project because I wanted to do it justice and I wanted to do it right. And I wanted to make sure that I was communicating the importance and the gravity of the narrative that I wanted to really put forth. And yeah, that was actually very conceptual. It was done in a studio. It was not done on the street. So I was flexing a lot of muscles that I hadn't done before.
Yeah.
And I was happy with the way it turned out. But I think there was a part of me that wanted to get back to seeing people without a mask, seeing people as they were. And so over the years after I left the academy, I spent a lot of time exploring that and what that could look like.
Right, right. That's interesting. When you were a student at the academy, who do you think your influences were? Like, who was
Mhm.
influencing you, or who were you looking at and excited about?
Yeah, specifically in that work, the work that I was doing was entitled Sweet Struggle. Specifically in that work, I looked a lot to Avedon because I loved the power of his portraits and the simplicity of his portraits and how he didn't really rely on a lot of superfluous things like props and his lighting was fairly simple. And it was just straightforward, and it was about the person, and it was about what the person was communicating with the viewer. And it was very confrontational in my eyes because you couldn't get away from the gaze of the subject. And so he was a big influence. And I think one of the things that I really liked about Avedon that resonated with me was in a documentary he had done years ago, he talked about a series of no's. And really, when he talked about a series of no's, he was talking about all the things that you didn't really need in the photograph to make it strong.
Oh, wow.
And so, just taking away all the extra stuff.
Yeah.
And so that really resonated with me. And I think you can kind of see that in my work as well. I don't like a lot of extra things. I don't fuss with a lot of extra lighting, whether it's on location or what have you. And so that really stuck with me. And then another person that I really love is the work of Roy de Caraval. I think his work is beautiful. And I think the way in which he portrayed African Americans and people of color just in their everyday life is beautiful and strong. He really elevated the mundane in a way that has always resonated with me. And I still look back at his work today. So those
Yeah.
are two people.
Oh, no, Roy's work is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm just going to put that in the chat for the students to reference.
Yeah.
Caraval. All that's good. It's funny that sense of confrontation with the subject, that's still in your work, even though you're on the street now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why don't you show a couple images and then we'll kind of talk about, I'll kind of interject as we start to look at what you brought today.
Sure. Do you want me to pull that up, or do you want to pull up
no,
the?
that's right. I have it.
And while you're doing that, yeah, I think in terms of like the sense of confrontation, a lot of times the way that I like to direct people is that they're looking directly at me or at the viewer, if you will. And the reason why I like to do that is because, especially when talking about subjects in the African American community, one of the reasons why I started doing photography is because I felt as though in the media, African Americans were not always shown in the greatest light and shown as one-dimensional. And I really wanted to combat that narrative whenever I possibly could. So I always like to show my subjects as strong whenever possible.
Mhm.
And this is really, it's been a very interesting few months since May, gotten a lot of different clients that I hadn't had before. And I think that some of that has to do with where I am, you know, in terms of location. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And as you all probably know, that is where a lot of the movement has really had a groundswell and kind of reverberated throughout the globe. And so as a result of that, myself, as well as a number of other African American photographers, have been given a number of opportunities that, you know, I would say we should have gotten all along, but now people are really paying attention to the African American lens. And so this was a project that was given to me by the New York Times. This was an assignment. And it was interesting to me because the police was not a subject that I had typically covered or necessarily had an interest in covering.
Yeah.
But I was given this assignment to photograph this gentleman and his son, which is the next photograph, who are both police officers here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the ways in which they were fighting within the system to change the system. And the next photograph you'll see was really interesting to me because this was probably the second assignment that I had gotten from the New York Times to do civil unrest and unrest within the police ranks and things like that. And whenever I would get those assignments, you know, I didn't spend a ton of time doing research or anything like that. I would just show up, and whoever was there, you know, I would photograph them. I would learn about the story that the writer was writing, but I didn't do much else. And this particular assignment, I actually was quite busy and I didn't do much at all. Typically, I would like look up their name and see who they were and things like that. And they said, hey, we want you to do this police federation assignment. And so I showed up and I said, okay, no problem. And I show up. And then I see this gentleman and three other white officers from the Federation. I didn't know what the Federation was. I hadn't thought much about it, but I had recognized them instantly as the same officers who were very heavily defending the police department and all the things that the police department had done within the city. And I thought, this is interesting, but it didn't matter.
Right.
And this gentleman knew that I was going to be coming from the New York Times and all this. I was ready to go. And he shows up and he instantly asked me, he's like, so what are you doing here? Why are you here? You know, and it was interesting because out of all the people that I have been approached by on the street or I approach, I had never been met with such interesting energy, if you will.
Yeah.
Especially from a Black man, no less.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. And I said, you know, I'm from the New York Times, you know, that, you know, I'm scheduled to be here. And so he was like, well, hurry up because I have to get somewhere. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So we did the shoot and he had instantly said to me, well, I bet that you are not interested in photographing me because I'm a police officer, because, you know, it wasn't popular to be a police officer at that point. And I said, no, you're a person. And that's why I'm here and I'm going to photograph you. So I just thought that this was really interesting. I had never had that sort of energy in my career, but that was one instance where it happened. So
wow, that is a great story. This is one story or two different? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
Those were, yeah, you can go back. Those were two different stories, actually. The the gentleman that I was referring to in the story was like a part two to that story, but those were two separate shoots.
Right. Beautiful portraits. Beautiful. I mean, I'm looking at them on a big screen here, and they're just like,
Oh, nice.
the power in his face is beautiful. How do you work? Like, do you push the button like 1,000 times or like 5 times? Or, you know, like what's your approach really?
It just depends. I mean, it depends on where the subject is with you and their comfortability with you. I think that it takes a really rare person to show up without their guard up and things like that. And sometimes that happens instantly, and sometimes I have to kind of work for it. And it's been interesting because these were all during the pandemic, these shots that I took. So I'm wearing 2 masks in the summertime.
Yeah.
So they can't really see anything. Oh, there's a question about how do I like my shots. I'll answer that in just in a quick second. But yeah, it just depends. With this gentleman, we didn't have a lot of time, and it depends on if I'm directing them or not. I did direct him a little bit, but not a ton. And quite frankly, the energy that he was giving me in the shot was exactly who he approached me as.
Yeah.
So I thought that it fit. And I wasn't trying to get him in a different headspace because that was what he was giving me. So I went ahead with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times I will have to work with subjects just to make them feel comfortable, just so they know that they can trust me and that I'm not trying to take advantage of them or their story. And once that happens, then you can see things kind of loosen up a bit. But yeah, it just depends. Maybe 5 or 6 in various locations. If I'm shooting for somebody like the New York Times, I really don't know what it is they're looking for. So I try to shoot the subject in multiple locations, just so the editor can have something to work with.
Yeah. Do you find that you and the editors are usually on the same page? Like, do you like the images that run, or do you feel like you always need to do your own edit?
I mean, that's a tricky one right there because sometimes they pull out things that I didn't necessarily see as the strongest piece.
Yeah.
And so it also depends on what the story is and where they're going with it. And I don't necessarily get to read the stories before, they get published or anything like that. They'll give me maybe a sentence or two, and then that's it. And so it just depends. A lot of times, I can't say that I'm always happy. I think one of the things that I have learned to do is to provide a tighter edit. Like a lot of times I would maybe give them like 100 photos or something. And then I was like, oh, why did I do that? I really need to provide a tighter edit of what I'm looking for, which is usually like 30 photos, I think is typically something good, like a nice amount to give them.
Right.
And so sometimes I kick myself and I say, why didn't I edit that down a little bit? But it's always interesting to see what they come up with. And sometimes it's totally different perspective, and it makes me look at my work in a different way.
Yeah, no, I always think there's a lot to be learned from like having like a seasoned photo editor start looking at
Mm-hmm.
it,
Yeah.
It's interesting because, after talking to you and then what you're sharing here is it seems like you, someone who I thought of as like fine art photographer, is suddenly like a journalist almost, like.
Yeah, and I never considered myself a journalist per se, like a street photographer. Yes, I think that's kind of where I came from. But then I started getting journalism jobs, and quite frankly, had to kind of learn on the fly a little bit of how, like, what that process was like the editing process, and even, the captioning process and all that stuff. So I can live in multiple worlds, I think, with the portrait work that I do.
Yeah, no, it seems like it fits, visually it fits. I'm just wondering if suddenly having to carry the weight of, oh, I'm representing the New York Times, if that is like something that you're comfortable with or you're adjusting to.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I thought that it was cool. I had not necessarily thought that I would pursue that work. As a journalism, or excuse me, as a journalist. But when the work came and the work had to do with the subject matter that I love so much, which is the African American community and like the lifting up of African American stories, I was all about it. So Stephen had a question. How did the New York Times come in contact with you for an assignment? Do you have to pitch yourself or did they discover you? Oh, so that was interesting because Tim, you and I were talking about this over the weekend.
Yeah.
Is so it was interesting because I think earlier on in my career, I definitely had to pitch things to people, and I wasn't getting those types of gigs. And the way that my assignments have happened since May have been really, they'll send me an email and they'll say, "Hey, Andrea, we have this assignment and it's about this. Would you like to do it? Are
Wow.
you available?"
Yeah.
And so that's quite different than, going out and pitching things, which I've done before and
Yeah.
shown portfolios and all that stuff into ad agencies and all that jazz. And this was quite different because it wasn't, Andrea, we want you to bid on this work. It's, Andrea, you have this job. Are you available to do it? And if not, then we'll go to someone else. But the majority of the jobs that I got, I probably shot like 20 different jobs since May, and they were all reaching out to me saying, "This is something we would like for you to do. Can you do it?"
That's awesome. Awesome. What was it like before, say, this summer where suddenly the tides turned and we realized that there was this
Mhm.
massive inequality that suddenly was put in everyone's face and everyone had to own up to it? What was it like
Mhm.
in the earlier stages of your career?
Um, I gotta say it was kind of tough in terms of trying to get work, but more importantly, I think the thing that I was really working through was just my own work and what is it that I wanted to say and what was I comfortable saying, and all those types of things. So I think I had a lot more work to do after I graduated with my MFA. I did graduate, at the top of the class, as one of the students that did really well. But I had more work to do on my portfolio and what presentation I wanted to show to the world. And so that was really what took up a lot of the time. And then figuring out my brand, what did that look like? From my website to my logo to all those things. And just continually working through it. They talk about that, the 10,000 hours thing. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, right. I had to spend 10,000 hours on something. And the reality is, you're just continually working through your process to see, to see what works. And that's what really took the most time. But yeah, I was pitching ideas and showing my portfolio around and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't. And then it was a lot of building relationships with people, um, and then them coming back and remembering my work.
Yeah.
So I have had that as well in the last few months or so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it fair to say that only in the last year has your work, have your assignments dealt specifically with issues involving race?
Assignments from like a publisher, yes. But I had been working in my own personal work and things like that. So my work has always revolved around the African American community and how we view ourselves in the world in which we live and the strength and resilience that we exude on a daily basis. So I've always been doing that work.
Yes.
I think as of recently is when the industry, I think, started to take notice and say, "Oh, okay, well," and not just for me, for a number of other Black photographers, who I follow on Instagram or follow their journey on their website. A number of them have been getting, opportunities that, like I said, we should have been considered for all along. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it seems like suddenly the country wants to hear these voices. And
yeah.
before it was too easy for them to ignore them or just keep doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny, you and I had talked a little bit, and I'm just wondering, how do you reflect on like before the summer and after the summer? You know what I mean? Like, you had said something to me, you were like, well, look, I'm getting recognized now, but it could have not happened too. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, sure. I've still been working and things like that. So, one of the things is I still have a full-time job. So I have a full-time job where I do direction, and I create materials for Historical Society. And one of the reasons why I like that job is because I have really been very focused about why I am there, and that is to make myself a better artist. And now, because of that, I do a lot of film direction and things of that nature. And so I was very intentional about, if I'm going to be somewhere and it's not working 100% on my photography, then it's going to benefit me in my art career.
right.
And so and then I told myself that if I took the job, then I'm going to be applying for grants and things like that. So I secured, the Tim Hetherington grant while I was there,
Oh,
and a couple other grants. So I was very intentional about why I was doing what I was doing, and that it was going to lead to my ultimate purpose, which is to tell the stories of the African American community, and be my own boss. So.
right. So you're essentially saying you'd be telling those stories whether the New York Times is steering you there and Vanity Fair is steering you there or not. You were focused on your personal work was going to be focused in that direction.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think it was maybe Ryan Baldwin, if he still works there, was one of the people that said, people aren't going to come to you for things that you don't already do. So, you have to have the body of work to represent, what it is they're looking for. And one of the things that really helped me was, surprisingly, it was Instagram, because I actually had not been shooting for a while because I had had my twins, and I was just focused on doing other projects and things like that. And I hadn't really been shooting a ton of reportage or portraits or whatever. And then everything happened with George Floyd, and there was just a groundswell of people in the streets. And I had to really weigh, like, if it was safe or not for me to be out there with my family. Our health is the highest priority. And so I didn't know if I was going to do it. And I honestly had said to myself, I'm not going to go. And then I was just like, but this is history though. This is the history of my people. And so had to really figure out what that looked like in a safe way to be able to go out there and come home and not endanger my family. And so nobody was hiring me. Nobody hired me to do it. I went out there and I told the story as I saw it.
Yeah.
And I decided to put it on my Instagram. And so I said, whatever, I don't care. I could have tried to pitch, that stuff to, NYT or Washington Post or wherever, but I decided that I didn't care. I was going to put it out there. And as a result, there was another photographer who saw the work, another photographer who has over 1 million followers. And he decided, well, I'm going to lift up her voice and the voice of, other African-American photographers, because this is not my story to tell.
Yeah.
And so he put my work out there. And as a result, I got more followers than I had, but that is what really made the editors pay attention to the work that I was doing, which was interesting. So it was because I decided to tell the story my own way, that people started to take notice.
Wow, that's a great story. That is a great story. But you are ignoring your perseverance, though. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, it's definitely not. It's not an overnight situation at all. No, I persevered, and I was, like I said, like, working through my own work, and what that ultimately looked like. And, had I not, persevered, then I wouldn't have had the opportunities. Like, people could have gone to the website and then they would have said, nah, next, so I was ready. And I think for me, I had been thinking about actually not keeping my photography website up because I thought I'm just moving towards film. And I think it was probably a couple weeks before I decided to go out and photograph the events that were happening. And I thought to myself, well, should I really be paying for it? I might just go ahead and let this thing go. So I'm glad I didn't, because the journey was, the editors saw it on Instagram. They saw the story that I was telling, and then they'd click on my website, go to the website, see that I could do the work. I had already been doing it for years, and then hit me up and then asked me if I wanted to do the job.
Wow, that's great. That's great. That's inspiring. What are we looking at here?
Well, this is a young man who actually was at, you can't really see it, but he's on the corner of George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this was an assignment that I was given by Le Monde in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
Which is French publication, or French newspaper, actually. And they asked us to go and talk to people who were voting, and if they were voting, and why not. And then this image here is, I was asked by the NAACP to photograph the president of, well, the then president of the Minneapolis branch of the NAACP, Leslie Redmond, for their Crisis, which is a publication created by W.E.B. Du Bois. And we had an afternoon together, or an hour or two together, and this is one of the portraits from that.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's neat. Oh yeah, and here's more voting.
Yeah, so this was actually an assignment that I received from Vanity Fair, which was not a publication that I thought would really be interested in reportage, but they're doing a lot more with that, and in really beautiful ways. This is one that was not published, but I was asked to go and tell the election story however I would like to. And I thought it was interesting because they had initially asked me to go to Wisconsin. And if anybody's been following politics, knows that Wisconsin is, more of a red state, and that it was not necessarily safe for someone like myself, an African-American woman traveling alone, to go, to a red state during that time. And I said, I'm sorry, I just don't feel like that's the place for me right now. And then I thought more about it, and I was like, yeah, and honestly, I'm interested in the African-American story. I know that there are a lot of people out there telling other stories, and that's great. But for me, my focus is to tell the African-American story and really shine light on how we're moving through the world. And they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said that was what I wanted to do. And they said, okay, well, do it in Minneapolis. So this is one of the images from that.
Oh, so they called and asked you, what do you want to do?
Well, they initially wanted me to go to Wisconsin. They were looking for a photographer to go to Wisconsin, and Minneapolis is not too far from Wisconsin, about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I was like, no, I'm not interested in telling that story.
Yeah.
And I essentially had kind of turned down the job. Right. And the editor, who was a great editor, basically said, we're also looking for somebody in Minneapolis too, if you have something that you'd like to do. And I said, well, yeah, and this is what I would like to do. So the assignment was to really kind of do the whole day. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to just really see, the African-American turnout in Minneapolis and really document that.
Wow, that is great. So, as you're telling these stories, it seems like you have, like, the idea of working as a photojournalist or a documentary photographer or any photo job, it's typically a very cutthroat industry. And you describe these things with a kind of casualness that sounds like, well, I want to do that one. I don't want to do that one. Oh, yeah, maybe I'll take my website down. Like, is it, I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on how you view, like, your role in the industry right now.
I think that African-American photographers and BIPOC photographers now have more of a role in the industry than ever before. And I'm happy about that. I think there was a big part of me that was like, you know, we've been here the whole time and
Yeah.
we've been, you know, talented the whole time. So there is that, you know, aspect. But I'm honestly happy that people are getting the shine that they deserve, you know, because our stories are so rich and have been overlooked for so long. And I just think that there's a nuance to, you know, being from a community and communicating about your community. And there's a beauty to it. And I just really love it. And there's a photographer on, I think he might still be on, Duquan Sweeney might be on this call, who just does it so beautifully. So
Yeah, I'm
I just
still here.
love,
Sorry, I'm still here.
hey, how are you?
I'm
He's
well.
here. He's here.
Yeah, he just does it so beautifully. And honestly, we've never met before, but we've met on Instagram. And photographers like Duquan, and all the ones out there doing it, it's so really beautiful just to see people getting their shine that they're due. So, and I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Duquan, but I
I
want to
mean,
put you on the spot.
I mean, no, it's okay. Thank you. And it's the same way. I mean, everything that you're saying about our community is like, you know, I can just, you know, it feel like you using the same words that I use, like, and it's just like
Hmm.
within this spirit that we do it in, right? Like, we
Yeah.
haven't never met, but we carry that, that spirit, how we feel and how we engage with our community, right? And
Hmm.
as I have my exhibit going on, and and it's
Hmm.
titled Dignity, Beauty, and Everything
Hmm.
Between, because it resonates with everything you just said. That's showing, our community in a positive light, which is very
Hmm.
important. Like, I'm the same way. I have a strong interest in just photographing my community because
Yeah.
for a long time it's, been shown in a negative light. So
Hmm.
yeah, so I agree with everything you said, and thank you so much for just showing it, and also just being inspired by other photographers. Like, I look at
Hmm.
your work and I'm like, man, it just make you just want to continue to do what we do, because we know we like, we doing it for a good reason. And just like, man, like you talking about Roy DeCarver is like one of my favorites, and
Yeah.
so we kind of like work in that same spirit. So it's important. I'm so grateful just listening to you, just listen to you talk, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for gracing us with those beautiful words. And that's the thing is, like, I saw Duquan's work, and he had come to Minneapolis. I think you had come to Minneapolis and shot for New York Times Magazine. And I think it was like Black Visions Collective
No,
or
no, that
something.
wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Oh, I thought that was you.
No,
Okay.
no, no, no. I wish I
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, and there's just, like you said, so much to be inspired by. And I apologize because that wasn't the work, but like I signed on to a talk that Duquan did, and I just was like, yes, it's really beautiful to just see us lifting each other up
Yeah,
and following people's journeys on Instagram and stuff. So it's
yeah.
nice.
Ah, that's great. Quan, thanks for coming to
Thank
this.
you.
And that was wonderful that you guys shined a light on each other there.
Yeah.
Hey, there's some questions here I thought maybe we
Yes.
could address now. Let's see, from Grace. She goes, how do you light your shots? Do you bring your own lights or do you use natural lighting? What cameras do you use? And lens for your portraits?
Sure. It just depends. Most of the time when I'm doing like reportage stuff, I'm really not bringing any lights with me. I might bring a reflector if it's a portrait and I know that it's going to be um very tricky lighting, if you will. Um, but for like shots like this, I just really didn't bring much with me. And so a lot of times I'm either trying to find the light or I might be directing people to be in the shade or whatever. So I usually work with what is available. When I'm doing like portrait projects, then I might bring my own lights. Um, I might bring, so I don't really like a lot of cumbersome things. I'm not a huge technical person. I learn what I need to learn to get done what I need to get done. And that's the only reason why I spend time on learning it. And so for a lot of the portraits that I had done early in my career, I had like a speed light and I had an umbrella, and that was it. And it wasn't tethered to my camera. It was quick and dirty, and I liked it just fine because it wasn't getting in my way. And now I use a pro photo kit that just really allows me the ability to use more flashes quickly and not wait for the recycle time. But a lot of the portraits that we've shown here, I did not use any lighting equipment on at all. But I do that when I feel like, you know, it might need a little something extra.
Mm.
And then what was the question? What cameras do I use? For assignments, for digital assignments and things like that, I use my Nikon. I use the mirrorless one right now. And I'm not a big lens person. So like, I don't really change my lens. I usually use the kit lens that comes with the camera, unless unless I'm doing something specific. So then I'll rent like you know, a 70 to 200 or something like that. But in general, I don't spend a lot of time on equipment things. With some of the projects that I'll show a little later, some of the images that come later in this, I actually use a Hasselblad. So when I'm working on like fine art projects that I know I want to, you know, just archive for a longer period of time, then I will, I'll use film and I'll get it scanned in and I will do that whole process. But that's a process, you know. And for things like these assignments, sometimes I'm not getting paid that much. So I don't spend a lot of time, you know, working through film, which is a more laborious and expensive process. So I'm using my digital camera for most of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that was good. Did that answer your questions, Grace?
Yeah, it did. Thank you so much. All your photos are just so inspirational, and I really liked your lighting choices.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, I actually struggled with lighting when I was at the Academy of Art. Oh man, that was crazy. I was really wanting to get in the studio and do studio lighting versus just like found ambient natural light and all that. And I struggled quite a bit. And then there was a photographer, I think his name was Ilan, and he kept moving the light around up and down, up and down. And he was like, you see, you don't see, you see, you don't see. And I was like, oh yeah, I see it. So it took me a little while, but I usually keep it really simple with lighting.
Interesting. Yeah, the work I remembered from when you were a student, though, had the light, it was studio lighting and it was nailed,
Mhm.
clear, and it was intentional, and it did exactly what you'd want out of that, I think, you know.
And it's you know, I've tried to do multiple lights. I can do them now and I, you know how to do all that. But when I was a student, I couldn't figure it out somehow. And so I went to the one light and it was clean and, you know, it would just kind of wrap around, not unlike, you know, forgive the Zoom lighting,
Yeah.
but this type of lighting is usually what I go for all the time.
Yeah.
It's, you know, at probably about a 45-degree angle to the subject. I try to make it as soft as I can. If I'm lighting it, it just depends on what I'm going for, but I don't like a lot of cumbersome lighting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense for sure. Oh, here's a question from Anita Muldoon. Do you have any of your blackface images to show? They are so powerful.
Hey, Nita. You know, actually, I don't. I'm trying to think if I have them on this computer. I actually don't have them on me, and I don't have them on my website currently. But if students are interested in seeing them, I can probably send you some, Timothy.
Yeah, sure, sure. The then from Stephen Lee, do you find it hard to focus on personal photography work when you are working in filmmaking simultaneously?
Yeah, I think I find it somewhat hard to focus on personal photography work when I'm working full time, which is what I have been doing for about the last 4 years. And before that, I was just freelancing and things like that. So that can be very difficult. And I actually am in my second day of my leave from my full-time job because I am going to be starting work on a National Geographic grant that I got that deals with COVID-19 and loss in the African American community in the Midwest. So that was the earlier question about pitching projects. So I do still pitch projects for grants and things like that, which is the work that, I really, really love. And I love doing the publishing work, but the personal projects are the ones that are probably the closest to my heart. And so I did pitch that project, and I will be starting that. And I think the important thing that I understood, I've had grants before, and I've kept my full-time job, and I still have it, but I know enough now to know that I need to take the space away from that to be fully focused on this work, at least for a certain amount of time, at least during the shooting, to be able to do the subject justice. This is a very tough subject that I'm going to be working with, and I want to give it the space that it deserves and the attention that it deserves. And so for me, I find that it can be very challenging to work on personal work when I have a full-time job. Yeah. But if you're intentional about it, then you can be good. And then we also added 2 kids. We added some twins to that mix a couple years back. That didn't really make it easier. So.
The demands of a parent. No, I'm amazed with what you can get done yourself. So, do you want to elaborate on that National Geographic grant? Because you had been talking about it, like this is the week you're starting it, or what is,
Yeah, well, right now I'm actually I actually hired a producer. So a producer that I had met at my full-time job. So there are a lot of great things from being in full-time spaces with creative people all the time, because I really learned like a lot of these things I would do by myself. I wouldn't have an assistant, any of that. And I kind of preferred it that way. Like it was, because for me, it was a personal experience, and I wanted the subject to feel comfortable with me. So I didn't really take a lot of people. I didn't really want a lot of people there. But when I started my full-time job, I realized, well, hey, if I'm going to, expand on this story, then I do need some other people who have more expertise than me, and that's okay too. And so I realized I'm going into this personal project, but this producer can help me be more organized, help me be on task. And so I hired a producer to get that work done. And we really are kind of in the phase where we're reaching out to people. So I'm cold calling people right now saying, hey, we researched the 4 cities that we would like to do the photos in. And so I'm cold calling people right now saying, hey, I know you don't know me, but can you sit down and talk to me about this very personal time in your life that you're still probably going through? Yeah. And so so that's the part where I'm at right now. So we have people who are interested. We don't have people secure yet, but we're getting them secure. And the goal is for me to be out shooting this weekend and then the rest of March.
Wow. That's a big deal. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. That is exciting.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Another question, and then we'll dig back into the photographs. From Trevino, Cordova. When you first started, what was your no-yes ratio when you would approach people to photograph in the street?
Mostly yes.
Really?
Yeah, mostly yes. Surprisingly. I mean, like I said, I had trepidation about going up to people that I didn't know. But I think for me, the important thing is to not approach people and say, can I take your photo? It's, hi, how are you? What's your name? And then learning about them. And we just talk for about, 5 minutes or whatever. And it's after that time, then I might even present my camera and say, well, hey, I'm out here and I'm hoping to take your photo. Are you okay with that? And a lot of times people say yes. Sometimes they say no, and then we keep talking just because I'm interested in them. And then they'll say, well, all right, you can do it then. And so it just depends. And usually the no's are not as bad as one might think they are. Usually people are very respectful, and they're just like, no, I'm cool. I don't want to do that right now. And it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I understand the no's more than I ever did. Yeah, I mean, I was a recipient of a lot of no's, but I think, yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
I just woke up. I don't want my picture taken. I don't want it out in the
Hmm.
world. I don't want, like, it's not always a political reason. I think sometimes,
Right, right.
like no, not today. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's their choice, you know. So I'm okay with that, you know. It really, at this point, I don't really get too phased by it, but I think with the project that I'm doing with the Nat Geo grant, I am a little bit more nervous about calling people, you know, because we're dealing with grief and loss and just, you know, all these things. And so I'm a little more nervous about that. But when I actually started doing it, then I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. And really, you know, it's just an exchange of asking that person to trust you. And if you are honest and open and sometimes vulnerable with them, then they see that they can, and they are more willing to gift you with their story.
Mm, that's a great philosophy. Let's look at your work again, and then we'll revisit those questions. And students, feel free to put your questions on into the chat. We'll get to everything if we do have time. Let's see, I skipped one here.
That's from the voting one. So I know we don't have a ton of time, but briefly, this was a young woman who was voting for the first time. Well, her daughter was voting for the first time. And so we just would get quotes from them. And she was very skittish about the voting process and democracy and all that stuff. But she was there because she wanted to show her daughter that it was important.
That is a beautiful portrait. How you're making these portraits with the masks on, I do not know. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, honestly, for me and my mom and my family are on this call, I'm like, I prefer you to keep the mask on, because, and honestly, it's fine. We do portraits with or without masks.
yeah.
It just depends. However, the person feels comfortable. If that's how they feel comfortable, then I'm okay with it. And I think, you know, a lot is communicated through their gaze and through their eyes. So, and it speaks to the time that we're in right now.
It
So.
does. It does. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm just surprised you're able to make such evocative portraits where all we're seeing is half
Mm,
of somebody's face. You know what I mean?
mm,
But body
mm.
language carries a lot, you know, too, for sure.
Hmm. You know, I hadn't thought about it like that. I mean, I don't have a ton of portraits from this time during that, or with people with masks, but I do have a few. And yeah, I hadn't thought about that too much. But this particular one, you know, wasn't challenging at all because this young woman was a flight attendant who was actually on, you know, on a break from a flight. She was in between flights, and she wasn't from Minneapolis, but she knew that she needed to come here
Wow.
in this space to see the memorial. And this one wasn't challenging because, and that's what I mean, like in terms of like the vulnerability, there's some people, like this was probably 3 shots, and then, you know, I was done, and the portrait was good. But you know, she wasn't afraid to be vulnerable and show what she was feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Nice.
Oh, and I should mention that the last one was from Juneteenth. I had been on assignment with New York Times to do Juneteenth. And this one was a bummer, though. I mean, it was a bit of a thing for me because I hadn't really done journalism, and those deadlines are tight.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I'll be able to spend time with the story. It's like, no, if you want to make the front page, then you have to have it in by a certain time. And quite frankly, all the images, like this image and then the next image that you'll see, was from Juneteenth as well. And none of them got published at all because I did not make the deadline.
Mm.
So that is a lesson for students. But honestly, I was bummed. I really was like, really, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, but the journalism thing was new to me. And I was really bummed because I thought that I had some really beautiful images that just would never be seen by that audience.
Right.
Like I said, I have my own audience. I'll put it on Instagram or wherever in a minute. But yeah, they didn't really get to be seen. And this was really nice because, you know, just wanted to show the exuberant side of the Black community and the celebratory side that is Juneteenth. And Juneteenth had a larger meaning this year for a lot of African Americans. And it was nice to kind of show that with some of these portraits and reportage images.
Oh, yeah.
And this was at Juneteenth as well in the same park. And, I just love my people, and I love the confidence that we have and the resilience that we show. And I think this image really reflects that. She's bad, and, she knows it. And I just loved it. So that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why I wanted to approach her.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, love this one.
Yeah, this one I thought was really interesting. This young man, I saw his t-shirt and I was like, yep. And just his whole energy, he's a young boy with confidence, and he actually was in a different spot. And I had taken some other images, and then I thought, no, that's not it. This is it right here. So trying to, use form and things like that to guide the viewer directly to him. And so this again was an image that I took later on in the day at Juneteenth, and I knew that I had missed the deadline. And, I had already made the deadline earlier, but I had missed the deadline to get on the front page and all this stuff. So I knew they probably wouldn't get published. But I was in the car, trying to upload my images. And I thought, no, I'm going to go back out because I want this for me. And so all those images that we just looked at, those 4 were from Juneteenth.
Oh, and then what do we have here?
Well, this, and I don't know where we are in terms of time, but we can always direct people. This is The Streets Are Talking is a personal project that I had been working on. I started doing this work in 2016 when protesters had overtaken the 4th precinct in Minneapolis, and they were protesting the death of a young man by the name of Jamar Clark at the hands of the police. And this is when, Minneapolis has a long history of protests, but this is when, Black Lives Matter was really getting a footing in, finding their footing in the Twin Cities. And so Black Lives Matter and other protesters were peacefully protesting, and they had overtaken the precinct for, I think it was over a month. So they had an encampment there, and I thought, well, I want to go down and see what this is about. And this is when I started to incorporate audio into my portraits as well. Because I think somebody had told me one time, they said, well, I just want to know what the person is thinking in your portrait. And I was like, really? Isn't it? It's not there. And so I was like, well, all right, there might be something to that. So then I started conducting audio interviews. And so that's actually how I'm going to be doing my Nat Geo project, is still portraits coupled with audio interviews. So the stories will be in their own words.
Oh, wow. Oh, interesting. So not video, still photos with audio.
Still photos. Yep.
So we are doing good for time. I know you have your hands full with 2 twins and a husband.
Yep.
Do you? How are you doing for time? I just want to be respectful of your time.
Well, I might have about, I know I'm having such a good time. I might have about 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay.
So for the sake of time, we probably won't watch this, but if people want to go to the website, it is on my website.
All right. And there are more questions that are coming in. And so let's go to the next photo.
Yeah.
And then I'll share.
Okay.
I'm first generation Black Minnesotan.
It might just autoplay. Sorry about that.
Communications director.
And you might have to, click pause on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And then you can go to the next.
Oh, there it is. So as we look at this, here is another question. There's a couple good ones. It says, you mentioned on some assignments, you encounter people who need time to open up. What are some things that work for you to get people to respond or to give you what you're looking for a given portrait?
Usually it's just talking to them. And then, I bring out my personality and things like that. And sometimes I go to an assignment and I'm just like, oh, I just want to go home. And I'm not like in a people mood, but most times I am in a people mood. But so I just kind of go into the mode of talking to them to see who they are and what makes them feel comfortable and things like that. And we're talking most of the time during the shoot, and then I might direct them here, or I might move their chin here, or tell them to, stand up straight and put their arms down to the side. Because a lot of times I like to just see what people will give me with that, just straight up and down. Like, and a lot of times I'll say, be a straight up with me, which means your shoulders are straight up and all that. And then sometimes it just depends on what the portrait is. A lot of times I've been asked to do, like a CEO or something like that for a piece for a magazine. And if it's, a woman, I'll just say, give me, shoulders back, chin up, like a boss. And so I will try to give people the energy that I think they might need to be in the headspace. And a lot of times I do that with my interviews too, like if I'm doing film or something like that, and I can see somebody's distracted, and I'll say, okay, well, let's just take a moment. Let me just give you a moment so you can think about, the gravity of this conversation. And a lot of times it's work that people are doing that are, it's for the community or what have you. And that work is powerful. So I talk to them about that, and I say, to claim your work and to show me what you want people to see when you think about this work. So really just having people kind of lean into the power that they have, because I think people don't always fully understand that and how much they are doing to make change or what have you. And those, a lot of times that's what I would like to see in a portrait. So for instance, I just did Andrea Jenkins, who is an African-American woman who is the first trans Congress or councilwoman in the US. And just, those were things that I would talk to her about, is just show me that you're a boss, and it just depends on what we're trying to convey. But I have a lot of things that I say to people, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. Another question from Violetta. What did you do to start funding your personal projects before you got jobs in your documentary work? It's a very valid question.
Yeah, that was definitely out of my pocket, most times. And sometimes, I know my mom is on here. Sometimes my mom would help fund a couple things. So from the bank of Sharon Reed, I guess. But most times it was, it was whenever I would get little money here or there, if I get $200, I might be spending it on, some film or whatever it was. And so now I'm in a different position, which is nice, but I hadn't been in that position before. And so one of the questions about equipment and things like that, like a lot of photographers I knew who were out shooting, like had thousands of dollars worth of equipment, all of that. Like that was not the place where I was at, where I could just go out and purchase a $3,000 lens or something like that. And not to say that I'm in that place now, because I wouldn't say that, but I can afford to go out and buy film, whereas, I might be trying to scrimp and save and pull a couple of things together to make that happen. But it was, I funded what I could on my own, and did the projects that I could on my own. Like this one was funded by me. And so I could afford to get maybe 4 rolls, but I couldn't afford to get them all at the same time. So I just did what I could when I could.
Right. Then another question, will you be working the National Geo job by yourself, or will you have assistants with you? And when you're getting to know people's stories, are you taking notes, or are you just absorbing and listening?
Yes, good questions. With the Nat Geo job is very interesting. I've never done a job this way before, because we, are in a pandemic, and we have actually been quarantining at home because our children are in a high risk category because they were born early. So we haven't seen many people. We don't even go to the grocery store, none of that. And so I have to be very strategic about how I'm going to do it. And that for me means that I'm not going to be staying in hotels and things like that. So I had to be clear about where I was going to be going and how long I was going to be staying there. And so we purchased a van that we are converting into an RV for that reason, so we could travel safely with our kids. And so I'll be using that, to go where I'm going. And with that being said, that means nobody is in the car with me.
Yeah.
So, and that means no assistance.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm doing it by myself. I do have reservations about the equipment that I'll be using, because I'll probably be using lighting. I will be using interview equipment. All those technical things you can get kind of bogged down on, but I'm, just preparing myself mentally for what I got to do. So I feel confident that I can do it. I mean, it would be nice if I had an assistant, but I'm not going to risk any of that right now. So I'll be doing it on my own. And then when I'm getting to know people's stories, am I taking notes? So yes, I am. Like, I have a phone call with a young woman who is a prospective subject for the call. And I do have notes. I actually am doing some of it in Airtable just because it's a larger project and I'm working with another person. So I'm just trying to keep track of those things. And then whenever I talk to somebody on the phone, I will take notes about what angle I'll be taking with the story and what questions I should ask them when I do the interview. But when I do the interview, it's all recorded audio.
Interesting. We just have a couple more minutes, I think, of Andrea's time. Any other questions from my class, who had to prepare questions? We want to make sure you can try to get these in.
I think there's one more from Violetta. Let's start. About funding.
Let's see. What did you do to start? I think we asked that.
That one already. Oh, yeah. Got it. Never mind.
The Jason Summers, you had some questions you sent me today.
Oh yeah. Sorry I'm late. I had a meeting with my resident director. It was more so just the question, because I was looking at some of your work and it was like your color work's really good, but your black and white is also just like really like this distinct like thing. And so I was wondering like which one you liked more, like as like a professional standpoint, and also just like your overall like approach to like how you like, I guess that was a question I was already asked, but like how you approach people and like how you get to know like people and to create like these more like intimate portraits, because I feel like there's like a certain extent that you have to go through in order to get that like perfect image,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I did want to show some of my black and white work today. I just didn't get it on the presentation in time. Like work like my elders project, that I chose to do that in black and white because I thought it lent itself well to being in black and white and more of a timeless sort of feel. Honestly, I like both. I think I had started shooting in black and white. So black and white film is what I started shooting in when I was at Howard University. And to be quite honest, it took me a while to see in color, which I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But because color is its own language, and I think color is intentional. And so sometimes for me, I feel like if the color's not like adding to the story, that it doesn't necessarily need to be in color. I do shoot in color more often than I shoot in black and white. And I think for projects like this one that you see here, The Streets Are Talking, these are the ones that are paired with audio interviews. Color was very important because we're talking about issues in the Black community, and I wanted to see that tonality and skin and all of that. And these as well, the ones that you'll see, for assignment work and things like that. A lot of times assignment work, it won't be in black and white, but it just depends. I mean, if they're asking for your artistic expression, then yes, by all means, consider whether it should be in black and white or in color. But for me, yeah, it took me a little while to see in color. And then I realized it was interesting conversation, but I was seeing in black and white, which might not make a lot of sense, but it took me a while to really like visualize the world in color when I started shooting.
100%. I've been starting to lean more towards black and white with all my stuff though, that's why I asked. And also I just recently started shooting Ilford like HP 400 black and white, so it's funny that she
yes. Yes, yes. That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see some of the student work too. That'd be cool. And you can maybe send it to me later. But yeah, the question about like getting to know people and things like that, I should kind of qualify. I don't actually spend a lot of time with the people. If I am doing like an assignment, I just can't. And like for pictures like this, we maybe spent 3 minutes together. So I don't spend, sometimes I don't have a lot of time to spend with people, but I think if you keep doing it and keep approaching people, then you'll start to kind of see what people need in order to feel comfortable and kind of let the guard down in order to give you that gift.
That's excellent advice. Excellent advice. Oh, let's see. Michelle, do you have time for another question?
Yeah.
Michelle, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just asking if you maintain any of the relationships that you've made while shooting anybody, like during these portraits or like Juneteenth, or even if you like knew any of them.
A lot of times I don't know the people, which is interesting. It takes me a lot more to photograph people that I know than it does people that I've never met before.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe because maybe it's like sometimes too close. But a lot of times, no, I'm usually meeting people in passing, and sometimes people understand that this is just a moment and they don't really want to have anything else. And if they do, then they will let me know, if they would like a copy or something like that. But most times people are not necessarily interested in keeping a relationship. I don't know. I mean, I do keep relationships with some people. It just depends on how long we've been working on the project or what have you. Like, for instance, the people that I'm approaching about the Nat Geo work, I likely will stay in contact with them because it is such a personal thing that I'm asking of them. And we'll be spending a lot more time together.
Excellent. Excellent. So we want to let you go, but we have one last question from our director, Adrienne Powell, who is here, who just turned her camera on.
Hello.
Would you like to the question yourself?
Yeah, my last question is, do you have any words of advice for students graduating soon?
Yeah, gosh, so many. For me, I thought like, I thought very highly of myself when I graduated with my master's, and I just knew that I had a project that people would love, and it was current and contemporary and all that. And that I would just be making money and getting jobs, and it didn't happen like that. And I think that for students to just continually be honing their craft and things like that, and really figuring out what it is that they want to say, because you might not know it immediately after you leave school, and the jobs might not be there immediately, but to keep studying and keep honing that craft, and just be very intentional about the moves that you make in terms of jobs and things like that. For me, I don't have a job like my full-time job. The actual title is social media manager. And I really, the day that I took that job, it was a little painful because it was like, but what about my work? But I really did approach it with the lens of storytelling, and that's what I was going to do. So I was able to kind of make that work for myself so that I wasn't being stagnant at all in my craft. And then the agreement that I made with myself that I was going to continually go towards my purpose no matter what, and constantly going back to that, reflecting on what I need to do to get there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Oh my goodness, we should let you go. Andrea Ellen Reed, you were so generous with your time.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for being able to tap into the hard questions and introspect as you did on this. And it's just super exciting to see all these things happening for you right now.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be here at my alma mater and just thankful for the time. So if you would like to share any student work, I would love to check it out too and see what you guys are working on. But I'm thankful for this time, and thank you, Tim. It was great to talk to you again.
Yeah, great to talk to you too. All right.